BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Anita Rani and welcome to Woman's Hour from BBC Radio 4. Good morning. Welcome to the programme. We have hit a significant milestone in women's history. For the first time in the UK, there are more women doctors than men. Quite an achievement considering that women were only first allowed to study medicine from 1874 and only in one place, the London School of Medicine for Women. So we're going to dig into the successes and look at the remaining challenges still faced by women doctors today. Now imagine you're walking down a high street and you suddenly get a waft of a soapy sweet smell hitting your senses. A shop you can smell before you even see the fizzy bath bombs and shampoo bars it's famous for. Most of you will know I'm talking about Lush. Well, it's celebrating its 30th birthday and one of the founders, Rowena Bird, will be here to tell us about how this global multi-million pound brand got to become what it is. And actor Tuppence Middleton has written a memoir explaining her obsessive-compulsive disorder, something that's often misunderstood and that she's lived with for 30 years. Tuppence will be here to explain how she navigates her life and motherhood with this mental health condition. You can get in touch with the programme in the usual way. Our text number is 84844. You can email the programme by going to our website and you can WhatsApp me on 03700 100 444. Your comments, thoughts and opinions on everything we talk about on the programme are more than welcome, including this. A video made and posted by Stranger Things actor Millie Bobby Brown has gone viral. In it, she criticises the recent press articles about her appearance, saying, "This isn't journalism, this is bullying." The 21-year-old posted a 3-minute monologue on her Instagram page in which she called out articles, headlines and the names of the reporters who wrote them. Here's a snippet of what she said.
I started in the industry when I was 10 years old. I grew up in front of the world, and for some reason, people can't seem to grow up with me. Instead, they act like I'm supposed to stay frozen in time, like I should still look the way I did on Stranger Things Season 1. And because I don't, I'm now a target. One article reads, "Why are Gen Zers like Millie Bobby Brown aging so badly? What has Millie Bobby Brown done to her face? Millie Bobby Brown mistaken for someone's mum as she guides younger sister Ava through LA. This isn't journalism. This is bullying." The fact that adult writers are spending their time dissecting my face, my body, my choices is disturbing. And the fact that some of these articles are written by women makes it even worse. We always talk about supporting and uplifting young women, but when it comes down to it, it seems a lot easier to just tear them down for clicks. Disillusioned people can't handle seeing a girl become a woman on her terms, not their own. I refuse to apologize for growing up. I refuse to make myself smaller to fit the unrealistic expectations of people who can't handle seeing a girl become a woman. I will not be shamed for how I look, how I dress, or how I present myself. We have become a society where it's so much easier to criticize than it is to pay a compliment. Why is it the knee-jerk reaction to say something horrible rather than just say something nice?
I'd like to hear from you this morning about your experience of this. Have you been shamed about your appearance? What's your experience and how did you deal with it? Get in touch in the usual way, 84844. But joining me to discuss what Millie Bobby Brown has said is Anita Bagwandas, beauty journalist and author of the book Ugly, Olivia Petter, journalist with The Independent, and Morgan Fargo, beauty and wellness editor at British Vogue. Welcome, all of you. Olivia, I'm going to come to you first because you're sitting in front of me. What did you make of Millie calling it out?
I mean, I think, kudos to her for calling it out. This kind of thing, unfortunately, happens all the time. It just so happens that Millie Bobby Brown is the latest target, to use her words. We see it over and over again, particularly with younger women in the public eye, because there is this fetishization of women like Millie, of women like Millie, who became famous when they were very young. And we do try to kind of keep them looking in a certain way and keep them youthful because we do have a problem with women who age. And so, I have nothing but respect for her for speaking out. But I do think that this is a much bigger problem that is about more than just one individual woman, because we do see this happening time and time again. This week it's Millie, next week it will be another woman in the public eye. We see women being torn apart for the way they look, being scrutinised, being criticised because they are not meeting the beauty standards in a way that is deemed acceptable by society. But I think what's also important to consider is how sometimes these women in the public eye, as much as they are targets of that system, they are also sometimes the ones that are upholding it. Because if you think about it, the women who we see every day in the public eye, the women who we see on films and TV screens and on our phones, on social media, on billboards, they are generally famous women. They are the ones that are upholding these unrealistic beauty standards. And I think that complicates things a little bit, but we need to consider that as well as how it's affecting individuals.
Morgan, what's your take on it?
I mean, to be honest with you, when I wrote my article, which was No One Cares How Old You Think Millie Bobby Brown Looks, it was because it was just so overwhelming. And that's, as a consumer, that's just seeing these things. I'm not Millie. I'm not the one being torn apart every single day about how I look, how old I look. People were saying she looks 40. I think she's 21 as it is at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know what anyone's confidence was like at 21, but mine was certainly not robust enough to deal with that. And I think the response that we had at British Vogue was just that this is untenable for someone to have to maintain their appearance in public and know that these things are going to be said about them. I do think it's a cycle that we appear to be in, where we see young, successful women and we almost put them onto this treadmill of building them up, and then we just tear them down, and it has such a distinct effect on their psyche. And you can see it with people like Amanda Bynes, for example, Britney, who I know that Millie is rumoured maybe to be in a biopic about. And I just feel like as a community, we have to get off, and that's what our responsibility is on my side.
But what about what Olivia's just said about them also being responsible, women in the public eye, for upholding these unrealistic beauty standards?
I think I understand what Olivia's saying. I do think it's changing. We just had an essay by Paulina Poroskova in our latest issue, our March issue, called Memoirs of an Invisible Woman. And it was all about how she was no longer going to promote anti-aging products because she didn't believe that aging was a bad thing. And I think at both ends of the spectrum, the very young women and the older women, I think there is starting to be more transparency about what it's like. And I believe that's what Millie's intention was with sharing her thoughts recently on Instagram.
Anita, I'm going to bring you into this. This is nothing new, is it, as Morgan's just said there. But where did these beauty standards even begin?
I mean, they've been going for centuries, essentially. But this sort of incarnation of really just wanting to keep women frozen in time and looking sort of as young as possible, it really amped up in the 1930s with the sort of birth of Hollywood's golden era. It was quite often written into women's contracts that they had to do everything they could to be as slim as they could, to look as young as they could, because they knew their shelf life within the industry was really short. And it's really sad that, almost a century later, we're still talking about these same things, and these things are still impacting women as young as Millie Bobby Brown, who's like in her very early 20s. And it's so sad that so much has changed, but actually so little has changed for us. And I think we need to really look at beauty standards as a whole to examine actually how much freedom we do have, because at the moment it doesn't feel like a lot.
What about Olivia's points, that maybe, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is there something about them being fair game because, they perhaps have had cosmetic surgery?
I don't think it's that they're fair game. I think women in the public eye feel pressured to look a certain way because of the system we are all operating within. And obviously for them, the pressures are much higher because of their, excessive visibility. I think with the cosmetic surgery stuff, what bothers me is that there is this culture of secrecy around it. We know that this work is happening. We know that women are getting things done to their faces, and that is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. What I don't like is that women are pressured to do what they can to look beautiful according to societal standards, but not tell anyone about what they are doing in order to look that way. So women who are getting work done in the public eye are not talking about what they are getting done. And I'm not saying the onus is on them to do that.
Exactly. We're still making it a woman's problem.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to fit in to maybe advance your career or just do what it takes to get to wherever it is you want to be. And still we're blaming them for wanting to do that.
It's not even that I'm blaming them. It's that by not feeling like we can be open about it, and I understand why these women don't feel like they can be open about it, but it raises those beauty standards higher and higher, making them even more unrealistic, and then creating this culture of secrecy where no one can really talk openly about the pressures we're all feeling and all kind of succumbing to. And I think that's really the point we need to get to if we're going to make any kind of tangible change here.
Anita, Who is setting these standards?
It's really tough because the women, who are in the public eye are under a huge amount of pressure and scrutiny for the reasons I mentioned earlier. There is a shelf life, and we see this in Hollywood. As soon as someone starts to look a little bit older, or actually not even that, as soon as they start to shift into a different age bracket, they are paired with much older co-stars, or there are so many examples in Hollywood where there is a much younger woman who is playing someone's mother, who is actually younger than them and older than them, sorry. And it's this perpetuation goes on and on and on, and across so many different industries. But it's really tricky because they are trapped in the cycle that we're all trapped in, and to a certain extent, and that is that we are pandering to patriarchy and the male gaze, and that is what controls everything from the beauty industry to cosmetic surgery to Hollywood.
Tell me about your own experience, Anita, of being in the public eye a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely, I feel the pressure that everyone else feels. I'm 40 as well, and that is definitely a milestone age that all of a sudden women do start to become a little bit invisible, particularly within my industry, where you sort of see lots of people start to disappear and etc. And yeah, it's really hard and it's really tough. And I'm not against injectables or tweakments or anything like that. I think they're all fine, but I think there is a lot of pressure to have them, and they've become almost as the same way as sort of getting a new serum or something. It's that industry is putting a huge amount of pressure on women without telling them about the emotional impact or the cost impact or the physical impact of those treatments. So I think it's a really tough time to be a woman, and that's across the board.
And a lot of people are making a lot of money from those insecurities as well. Morgan, she called out the names of the journalists. Do you think she should have done this?
I think if you're not inside the industry, it's difficult to know how it works. And I think, honestly, Millie might not have had enough of an understanding that these writers are probably entry level, they're probably junior writers, and they are being told that, clicks are happening if you write about Millie Bobby Brown looking old. And so they have to do it. And if they don't do it, then they're essentially going against their editor or their director, whoever is in charge. And that could mean that they lose their job. So I'm not going to disagree with what Millie did, because I haven't ever been under that sort of public scrutiny. I don't know what my brain or my nervous system would do if I was. But I think those writers are under an unfair stress from their editor or whoever is designing their content plan.
So maybe she should have called out the editors rather than the young journalists. But aren't then we all complicit? Because if it's clicks and likes and eyes on these stories that are to blame for this whole thing, then surely that's us, the public, Olivia.
Yeah, we are all complicit because we are all clicking on those stories. And I think, intrinsically, we have to fess up to the fact that internalized misogyny is a very real thing in our culture. And just because that's something that you and I don't necessarily agree with, there are a lot of women out there that feel, I guess, a lot of kind of schadenfreude by seeing a young, beautiful woman in the public eye being torn down. And that is what's ultimately fueling the appetite for stories like this and for those headlines that Millie was calling out in her post. So I think it's about, like I said, it's about looking beyond this individual story and trying to tackle the wider culture as a whole and what is going to continue fueling this cycle. Because, like I said, it will continue. Yeah,
there's a couple of things going on with what she said, though, because there's the one thing which is the bullying and being torn down because of the way she looks, and some really mean things being said about her. Why are Gen Zers like Millie Bobby Brown aging so badly? Not only dissing Millie Bobby Brown, but her entire generation there in one sentence. But the other slight more disturbing thing is what she was saying, Anita, is about being, when she was on our screens as a 10-year-old, and it's this infantilization of her as a woman. We just don't want to see her grow into a woman. We want to keep her as a child. And that's sort of almost more sinister, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really sinister, and it's about control, because actually you can control a child to a certain extent, but actually as women get older, we have more confidence, we grow into ourselves. There are messy parts, there are difficult parts, we have opinions, and that is what people want to control, and that's the bigger narrative here.
What difference, Livia, do you think this will make on the way women are reported on? Any? Do you think she's got any power by doing this?
Look, I would love to turn around and say to you, yes, it'll be a total massive change and the world will change and be a better place, and no woman in the public eye will ever be torn down again. But I just don't think that's the case. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the world we live in. I think it will be another week until another young woman is torn down, and we see this repeating over and over again. And I think there is definitely progress happening in the sense that, we are having this conversation here today. People are more aware of it. She got a lot of praise for speaking out, Millie did, which I think is wonderful, from lots of other famous women. But ultimately, I don't have much hope that this is going to stop here.
I feel like we all breathed a sigh of, yes, she just said it. And then we all went back to putting on our lipsticks and looking in the mirror. And so we will be back here, I'm sure, discussing this again at some point. But Morgan, Anita and Olivia, thank you so much for joining me to discuss that. Your thoughts and opinions, please.
BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, this is Nuala McGovern, and you're listening to the Woman's Hour podcast. Hello and welcome to the programme. Well, we have Gillian Anderson this hour to speak about sex, fantasies and elections. That is coming up. Also today, Elizabeth Sankey entered a mother and baby psychiatric unit after giving birth due to severe mental health issues that came postpartum. The deep friendships that she made while there helped her heal. And Elizabeth likens them to a witch's coven. Well, it's all in her fascinating new film, Witches. She'll be here in studio with me. You'll also hear from Bethany Hutchinson. She is one of 8 women, all nurses, who are taking their NHS trust to an employment tribunal for allowing a trans woman to use their changing facilities. And I want to hear your stories of long-distance relationships. Maybe you heard Robin Malcolm on the programme yesterday. Well, she lives in New Zealand. Her partner, Peter Mullen, in Scotland. Now that is a long-distance relationship. And then I saw Colleen Rooney has been speaking. She is staying in Liverpool. I suppose getting out of I'm a Celebrity, but generally in Liverpool with the kids, even though her partner Wayne is working in Plymouth. He's head coach for Plymouth Argyle. So not so far, but still long distance at the moment. And I want to know, have you done it? Are you doing it? Why? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? Can it work? Can it work better than being in the same house? You can text the programme. The number is 84844. On social media, we're at BBC Woman's Hour, or you can email us through our website. If you prefer WhatsApp, we have a number for you there too. Message or voice note, it is 03700 100 444. 84844 instead, if you'd like text. Now, I want to turn to Dean Dervalange speaking to me from Avignon, from the courthouse there, and you can find links to help and support on the Woman's Hour website if you have been affected by anything you heard in that interview. Jeannie got in touch. She says it's not what the women think that's important, it's the effect of this trial on what men think that is critical. I want to turn to Bethany Hutchinson. She is one of 8 women, all nurses, who are taking their NHS trust to an employment tribunal for allowing a trans woman to use their changing facilities at work. Bethany works at the Darlington Memorial Hospital in County Durham. And when I spoke to her, I asked her when she first became aware that a colleague who is trans was using the women's changing room.
Yeah, so this kind of kicked off in July 2023. So without any sort of warning or consultation from senior management, we became aware of a male changing in the female changing room. And this has led to nurses having panic attacks before their shifts. It's led to international nurses wearing clothing underneath their uniform because obviously culturally they can't be exposed or in a state of undress in front of any other male other than their husband. And generally just a feeling of anxiety amongst many female members of staff, looking over their shoulder, worried that this person's going to walk in and see them in a state of undress.
You use the word male, but what you mean is a trans woman colleague.
This person self-identifies as female. This person has had no surgery, does not take hormones, is having sexual intercourse with a female, as far as I'm aware. So I would say a male.
And the person you are referring to would use she, her pronouns, as far as we know. Yeah. But you don't agree to using that?
I don't agree to using that, no.
And why?
Because they're a male. They are acting like a male. They have all their male parts in place, and I believe that sex is it's a biological fact. It's not interchangeable.
There's kind of 2 parts to that in a way, Bethany. If the person dressed more traditionally as a female, for example, Would that make a difference?
Not necessarily, no.
If this person had surgically transitioned, would that be something you would accept when it comes to the changing room?
I mean, it's not for me to make these decisions, actually. You know, personally, I think that you shouldn't really allow anybody in with XY chromosomes because, you know, where do you draw the line? But this is not for me to make the decision.
But you are making the decision to take it to an employment tribunal for letting this person use those changing facilities at work. So you are taking a stand, making a decision.
Yeah. I mean, I am making a decision because the trust have put us at risk, not because of this particular person, may I add. I have never alleged that this person is a predator, but the policy that the trust have in place, it puts women at risk because it states that men can self-identify as women and access the female changing room. All they have to do is go to a senior member of staff and say, look, I identify as a woman, and that's it, they're allowed in.
You talk about being at risk, if not from this person, but from that policy specifically. Yeah. What is the risk?
Harassment, rape, sexual assault, voyeurism, you know, those types of things.
What response have you had from your trust?
They've been extremely unsupportive. When we eventually had a meeting with HR, because this rumbled on for a year where we were sort of dismissed, but HR told us that we needed to be more inclusive, that we needed to broaden our mindset, that we needed to compromise, and we needed to be educated. And, you know, I'm dealing with nurses who have had, you know, sexual abuse as a child, nurses who have been in relationships that have been violent at the hands of males. And I would defy anyone to sit across from these nurses and say, you need to broaden your mindset. Wes Streeton, when we went to meet with him, we explained this to him. He said, you know, that's not a healthy perspective. That's not healthy to say that to somebody. I agree, it's not healthy, but it's also extremely insensitive. It's appalling.
So, and Wes Streeton, the health secretary, just to put it in context, but have you spoken with the person in question at all, who's at the centre of this, that you object to their presence in your changing room?
No.
Have you tried to?
No, I don't think that would be wise at the moment.
What is the situation right now when it comes to the changing rooms? You mentioned some of your colleagues that are uncomfortable or do not want to use the original changing room as it stands. So what's happening?
Yeah. We walked into work one day and we were confronted with a poster on the female changing room door, which I must state now has been removed. We're not sure who has removed it or who put it up there, but there was a poster on the changing room door which stated that it was an inclusive changing room and that we were not to remove the sign. The same day we were told that we had to be moved to a tiny office that had been cleared out of all things. It was to be called the locker room. And when we walked in there were no lockers in there. We had to put our belongings on the floor, which obviously is an infection control risk and a security risk. This room's way too small for the amount of nurses that need to use it. And it opens onto like a busy orthopedic corridor and is opposite a side room so patients can look in. If you walk in and somebody's getting changed, everybody in the corridor is going to see that person. So it's completely inappropriate. And I believe the trust think that they've done it to appease us. But my argument is that changing room, that locker room, it still falls under the same policy. There is not another policy in place. So if a transgender individual or a self-IDing person wanted to access that changing room, they can.
When it comes to the hospital, if a trans woman, for example, came as a patient, she will not be put on a single-sex women's ward.
That's correct, yeah.
So the patient policy is different to the staff policy as you have explained it.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
Well, the answer we got from HR, because we did ask that question, is just that public law is different to employment law. That was the answer.
You're taking the trust to employment tribunal. Your legal case has been funded by the Christian Legal Centre, which is part of the organisation Christian Concern. Why did you decide to take that route?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of rewind our story a little bit. So obviously we were all concerned. We didn't expect to ever have to deal with this sort of thing. And I think for me and for many people, when you're in a sort of state of not sure what to do with things in life, you turn to your family, don't you, for advice. And I'm unapologetically a Christian. My parents are unapologetically Christians. And they advised me to go and contact Christian Concern. And I was extremely nervous about this. You know, I cautiously approached them just because I didn't know what their response would be. I didn't really know of Christian Concern before this. But what I would say is that they have been extremely supportive of not just me, but the other nurses who don't have a Christian background. Some of them don't have any faith at all. And this is not a Christian campaign. This is for all women. This is for women of different religions, different cultures, different backgrounds. And that's what we're fighting for.
But you will know, of course, as they cover the costs of your legal case, that they also represent, for example, individuals who want to challenge buffer zones outside abortion clinics, or people who are fighting being sacked for holding what they would call a biblical view on LGBT issues. Does it concern you at all to align yourself in that way?
No, it doesn't concern me. My fight is for women's safe spaces, and that is the fight that we're on. There is no other involvement in anything else.
Do you agree with their position on those other issues as I described them?
I don't think that's for me to answer right now, actually.
How do your Christian beliefs, Bethany, come into this?
Yeah, so I believe that sex is a biological fact and that it isn't interchangeable at all.
And is that a Christian belief?
I think it's a Christian belief and also a scientific fact, yes.
Has there been, just as you were describing, I suppose, this upheaval that you've talked about with changing rooms, has there been division within the nurses, within your colleagues on this issue? I'm just wondering what it's like for you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think it was... Originally, it was quite hostile. I think that some nurses just kind of felt sorry for their friend and then realised that there was actually a bigger picture. I would like to point out that this isn't a campaign against this one person. I don't hold anything against this one person. Unfortunately, this person has been the catalyst and has raised awareness about something. And actually, I do feel like this policy has put this person at risk as well. And the trusts are responsible for that person also. But yes, originally it did feel slightly hostile, but I think that the more that we talk about it and the more that the nurses become aware, and I'm saying this as a minority of nurses, I'm not saying that the majority of the hospital are against us. Actually, I think we have a vast amount of support from the nurses, male and female. But I think that as they become more aware of the policy and the loophole in it, they support us.
How do you view trans people's rights?
Trans people have rights, yeah. Just like women have rights and men have rights, you know, but one particular group's rights can't trample somebody else's rights. And I'm not saying that trans people or self-ID people should be ostracized to a tiny cupboard like we have. I'm advocating for them to have similar facility, that, you know, the same facilities as us, private facilities where they can get change with dignity and respect.
And I do want to read from a spokesperson for County Durham and Darlington NHS Foundation Trust. They say, the Trust is committed to providing a safe, secure and respectful environment for all colleagues and patients, operating within the law and adhering to national policies. Additional alternative changing facilities have been put in place. These include a private, individual, lockable changing room. An office has been converted into a locker room for the storage of belongings. The Trust has processes in place for listening to and responding to concerns raised by any of our colleagues. We take all concerns raised seriously and investigate them thoroughly. An internal investigation continues to take place while the legal proceedings also continue.
Considering we were talking about risk here, and, you know, the NHS is full of risk assessments. As soon as a patient hits the ward, they are risk assessed. You know, we do falls risks, we get a wristband on them, we assess their allergies, all that sort of stuff. The fact that a group of nurses raised a risk and it was sort of brushed off for a year, I mean, I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
This is a case that people will have strong opinions on both sides, I think. It's like a fault line, perhaps, of trans rights and women's rights. How does it feel to be in the centre of it? Do you feel you will get to a resolution that everybody can live with?
I'm hoping so. Certainly, I'm hoping so. Yeah. we have provided a sort of draft policy for Wes Streeton to take a look at, because he requested that. And I'm hoping that going forward, that will provide a solution that everybody's happy with and everybody's comfortable with, and, where people can change with dignity. And I did mention previously that it was about advocating for a third changing space where it's of a similar ilk to the female and male changing space.
Is that what you gave to Wes Streeting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did he say?
We don't know yet. It's under review at the moment, but hopefully going forward, he'll definitely take some guidance from it.
That is Bethany Hutchinson, one of a group of nurses taking their NHS trust to the Employment Tribunal over the transitioning in the workplace policy. And I should say we did approach the individual trans colleague referred to by Bethany in that interview, but we have not heard back. You also heard Bethany there mentioning Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. A spokesperson for the Department of Health and Social Care has said to us that the Secretary of State met with 5 nurses from the Darlington Nursing Union last month to hear about their concerns concerning single-sex spaces in NHS hospitals. The Health Secretary is clear that everybody deserves to feel safe and treated with respect at their workplace. 84844 if you want to get in touch. Many of you have about long distance relationships. Let's hear them. At the point that my husband and I were organising our wedding, a job opportunity came up in the Netherlands. My fiancé supported my application, and by the time it came to our wedding day, we broke it to our family and friends that a month after getting married, I'd be leaving the UK. I had a contract end date of 2 years, and we spent the next 2 years travelling between the two countries, and it was an amazing start. It was an amazing start to our marriage. We've been married 25 years and it is still a very fond memory in our hearts. Here is another. Your husband partner's distance away from you is inversely proportional to his faithfulness. Married for 25 years, but when he worked away, he couldn't handle the distance and felt abandoned by us that we didn't come along with him. For the second time, as with exam-aged children, he had affairs. I found out. I would never ever advise even the strongest marriage doing long distance for long. Here's another. I have never lived with he who is now my husband. We met in October 97 and have been together ever since, marrying 2 years ago. When we married, a work colleague asked David if we were going to live together. His response, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I was born in 1949. He was born in 1966. Keep them coming. 84844.